Dvaipayana continued. When the attire of Draupadi was being thus dragged, the thought of Hari, and she herself cried aloud, saying, O Govinda, who dwells in Dwaraka, O Krishna, who are fond of the gopis in Vrindavan, O Keshava, do you not see that the Kauravas are humiliating me, O Lord, O husband of Lakshmi, O Lord of Vraja, O destroyer of all afflictions, O Janardana, rescue me, who am sinking in the Kaurava ocean. O Krishna, O great yogi, soul of the universe, creator of all things, O Govinda, save me, who am distressed, who am losing my senses in the midst of the Kurus. Thus did that afflicted lady, resplendent still in her beauty, covering her face, cried aloud, thinking of Krishna, of Hari, of the Lord of the three worlds. Hearing the words of Draupadi, Krishna was deeply moved. Leaving his seat, the benevolent one, from compassion, arrived there on foot. And while Yagyeshani, that's Draupadi, because she came from a yagya, was crying aloud to Krishna, so also Vishnu and Hari and Nara for protection. The illustrious Dharma, remaining unseen, covered her with excellent clothes of many hues. As the attire of Draupadi was being stripped, after one was taken off, another of the same kind appeared, covering her. And thus did it continue until many clothes were seen. And, O exalted one, owing to the protection of Dharma, that's Krishna, hundreds upon hundreds of robes of many hues came off Draupadi's person, and there arose then a deep uproar of many, many voices, and the kings present in that assembly, beholding that most extraordinary of all sights in the world, began to applaud Draupadi and censure the son of Dhritarashtra. Bhima, squeezing his hands, with lips quivering in rage, swore in the midst of all those kings a terrible oath in a loud voice. Bhima said, Hear these words of mine, O Kshatriyas of the world. Words such as these were never uttered before other men, nor will anybody in the future ever utter them. Lords of the earth, if having spoken these words I do not accomplish them hereafter, let me not obtain the region of my deceased ancestors. Tearing open in battle by sheer force the breast of this wretch, this wicked-minded scoundrel of the Bharata race, if I do not drink his life blood, let me not obtain the region of my ancestors. Hearing these terrible words of Bhima that made the hair of the listeners stand on end, everybody present applauded him and censured the son of Dhritarashtra. When a mass of clothes had been gathered in that assembly, all dragged from the person of Draupadi, Dushasana, tired and ashamed, sat down. Beholding the sons of Kunti in that state, the persons, those gods among men that were in that assembly, all uttered the word, I am the son of Dhritarashtra. And the united voices of all became so loud that they made the hair of anybody who heard them stand on end. All the honest men that were in that assembly began to cry, Alas! The Kauravas have not answered the question that has been put to them by Draupadi. She asked a question, it was unanswered. Like, is this right? Censuring Dhritarashtra together, they all made a loud clamor. Then Vidura, the master of the science of morality, waving his hands and silencing everyone, spoke these words. Oh, those in the assembly, Draupadi, having put her question, is weeping helplessly. You have not answered her. Virtue and morality are being persecuted by such conduct, that the conduct of not answering. When an afflicted person, like one that is being consumed by fire, approaches an assembly of good men, those in the assembly should quench that fire and cool him by means of truth and morality. When the afflicted person asked the assembly about his rights, as sanctioned by morality, those in the assembly should, unmoved by interest or anger, answer the question. O kings, Vikarna had answered the question according to our knowledge and judgment. You should also answer it as you think proper, knowing the rules of morality, and having attended an assembly. He that does not answer a query that is put incurs half the demerit that is attached to a lie. He, on the other hand, who, knowing the rules of morality and having joined an assembly, answers falsely, assuredly occurs the sin of a lie. The learned quote as an example of this the old history of Prahlad and the son of Angirasa. So then he tells the history. In olden days, there was a chief of the Daityas of the name Prahlad. He had a son named Virochana, and Virochana, for the sake of obtaining a bride, quarreled with Sudhanwan, the son of Angiras. They, Virochan and Sudhanwan, mutually wagered their lives, saying, I am superior, for the sake of obtaining a bride. And after they had quarreled with each other, they both made Prahlad the arbitrator to decide between them. And they asked him, who amongst us is superior to the other? Answer this question, speak not falsely. Frightened at this quarrel, Prahlad cast his eyes upon Sudhanwan. And Sudhanwan, in rage, burning like unto the mace of Yama, told him, if you answer falsely, or do not answer at all, your head will then be split into 100 pieces by the wielder of the thunderbolt with that bolt of his. Thus addressed by Sudhanwan, the Daitya, this Prahlad, trembling like a leaf of a fig tree, went to Kashyapa of great energy for taking counsel with him. And Prahlad said, you are, O illustrious and exalted one, fully conversant with the rules of morality that should guide both the gods and the asuras and the brahmanas as well. Here, however, is a situation of great difficulty in respect to duty. Tell me, I ask you, what regions are obtainable by them who, upon being asked a question, answer it not, or answer it falsely? Kashyapa answered, he that knows but doesn't answer a question from temptation, anger, or fear, cast upon himself 1,000 nooses of Varuna. And the person who, cited as a witness with respect to any visual or audible knowledge or evidence, speaks carelessly, cast 1,000 nooses of Varuna upon his own person. On the completion of 1 full year, one such noose is loosened. Therefore, he that knows should speak the truth without concealment. If virtue, pierced by sin, repairs to an assembly for aid, it is the duty of everybody in the assembly to take off the dart or the arrow. Otherwise, they themselves would be pierced with it. In an assembly where a truly censurable act is not rebuked, half the demerit of that act is attached to the head of that assembly, a fourth to the person acting censurably, and a fourth unto those others that are there. In that assembly, on the other hand, when he that deserves censure is rebuked, the head of the assembly becomes freed of all sins. The other members also incur none. It is only the perpetuator himself of the act that becomes responsible for it. O Prahlad, they who answer falsely, those that ask them about morality, destroy the meritorious acts of their 7 upper and 7 lower generations. The grief of one who has lost all his wealth, of one who has lost a son, of one who is in debt, of one who is separated from his companions, of a woman who has lost her husband, of one that has lost all in consequence of the king's demand, of a woman who is sterile, of one who has been devoured by a tiger, struggling in the tiger's claws, of one who is a co-wife, of one who has been deprived of his poverty by false witnesses, his property by false witnesses, have been said by the gods to be uniform in degree. These different sorts of grief are his who speaks falsely. A person becomes a witness in consequence of his having seen, heard, or understood a thing. Therefore, a witness should always tell the truth. A truth-telling witness never loses the religious merits and earthly possessions also. End of the story. Hearing these words of Kashyapa, Prahlad told his son, Sudhavan is superior to you, as indeed his father Angiras is superior to me. Sudhavan's mother too is superior to your mother. Therefore, O Virochana, this Sudhavan is now the Lord of the life. At these words of Prahlad, Sudhavan said, Since unmoved by affection for your child you have adhered to virtue, I command, let this son of yours live for 100 years. Vidura continued. Let all the persons present in this assembly, hearing these high truths of morality, reflect upon what should be the answer to the question asked by Draupadi. The kings that were there, hearing these words of Vidura, answered not a word. Yet Karna alone spoke unto Dushasana, telling him, Take away this serving woman Krishna into the inner apartments. And thereupon Dushasana began to drag before all the spectators the helpless and modest Draupadi, trembling and crying piteously unto the Pandavas, her lords. It's not the end. We're going to hear from Grandfather Bhishma, because that's what we're hearing from. So this is the next section of this parva. Draupadi said, Wait a minute! Wait a little! Oh, worst of men! Wicked-minded Dushasana! I have an act to perform, a high duty that has not been performed by me yet, dragged forcibly by this wretch's strong arms. I was deprived of my senses. I salute these revered seniors in this assembly of the Kurus. That I could not do this before cannot be my fault. Vaishampayana said, dragged with greater force than before, the afflicted and helpless Draupadi, undeserving of such treatment, falling down upon the ground, thus wept in that assembly of the Kurus. Alas! Only once before on the occasion of the Swayamvar was I beheld by the assembled kings in the amphitheater, and never once beheld afterwards. I am today brought before this assembly, she whom even the winds and the sun had not ever before in her palace, is today seen in her before in her palace, is today before the assembly and exposed to the gaze of the crowd. Alas, she whom the sons of Pandu could not, while in her palace, suffer to be touched even by the wind, is today suffered by the Pandavas to be seized and dragged by this wretch. Alas, these Kauravas also suffer their daughter-in-law, so unworthy of such treatment, that to be thus afflicted before them, it seems that the times are out of joint. What can be more distressing to me than that? Though high-born and chaste, I should yet be compelled to enter this public court? Where is that virtue for which these kings were noted? It has been heard that the kings of ancient days never brought their wedded wives into the public court. Alas, that eternal usage has disappeared from among the Kauravas. How is it that the chaste wife of the Pandavas, the sister of Prishita's son, the friend of Vasudeva, must be Vasudeva, is brought before this assembly? O Kauravas, I am the wedded wife of King Yudhisthira the Just, hailing from the same dynasty to which the king belonged. Tell me now if I am a serving maid or otherwise. I will cheerfully accept your answer. This mean wretch, this destroyer of the name of the Kurus, is afflicting me hard. O Kauravas, I cannot bear it any longer. O kings, I desire you to answer whether you regard me as one or not. I will accept your verdict, whatever it be. Bhishma now turned to speak. I have already said, O Blessed One, that the course of morality is subtle. Even the illustrious wise in this world fail to understand it always. What in this world a strong man calls morality is regarded as such by others. However, otherwise it may really be. But what a weak man calls morality is scarcely regarded as such, even if it be the highest morality. From the importance of the issue involved, its intricacy and subtlety, I am unable to answer with certitude the question you have asked. However, it is certain that as all the Kurus have become the slaves of covetousness and folly, the destruction of our race will happen on no distant date. O Blessed One, the family into which you have been admitted as a daughter-in-law is such that those who are born in it, however much they might be afflicted by calamities, never deviate from the paths of virtue and morality. O Princess of Panchala, this conduct of yours, namely, though sunk in distress, you still cast eyes on virtue and morality is assuredly worthy. These persons, Drona and others, of mature years and conversant with morality, sit heads downwards, like men that are dead, with bodies from which life has departed. It seems to me, however, that Yudhishthira is an authority on this question. It behooves him to declare whether you're one or not. Passing the buck. Anyway, so that's as far as I went. Should we continue? Okay. We discussed his first response to Yudhishthira's how to understand Dharma. Now there's a whole bunch of other dharmas he's going to answer. Dana Dharma, Raja Dharma, Moksha Dharma, Shri Dharma, Bhagavat Dharma, Samavyasa Yogataha. It's a 3-page purport. Bhishma then explained, this is now text 27, 1927. Bhishma then explained, by divisions, acts of charity, the pragmatic activities of a king, and activities for salvation. Then he described the duties of women and devotees, that's 5, both briefly and extensively. Now that's in Mahabharata, extensively, and here is like just a purport briefly. Srila Prabhupada's purport. To give charity is one of the householder's main functions, and he should be prepared to give in charity at least 50% of his hard-earned money. A brahmachari or student should perform sacrifices, a householder should give charity, and a person in the retired life or in the renounced order should practice penances and austerities. Those are the general functions of all the ashramas or orders of life in the path of self-realization. In the brahmachari life, the training is sufficiently imparted so that one may understand that the world as property belongs to the Supreme Lord, the Personality of Godhead. No one, therefore, can claim to be the proprietor of anything in the world. Therefore, in the life of a householder, which is a sort of license for sex enjoyment, one must give in charity for the service of the Lord. Everyone's energy is generated or borrowed from the reservoir of energy of the Lord. Therefore, the resultant actions of such energy must be given to the Lord in the shape of transcendental loving service for Him. Then he gives a metaphor. As the rivers draw water from the sea through the clouds and again go down to the sea, similarly, our energy is borrowed from the Supreme Source, the Lord's energy, and it must be returned to the Lord. That is the perfection of our energy. The Lord, therefore, in Bhagavad Gita 9:27 says that whatever we do, whatever we undergo as penance, whatever we sacrifice, whatever we eat, or whatever we give in charity, must be offered to Him, the Lord. That is the way of utilizing our borrowed energy. When our energy is utilized in that way, our energy is purified from the contamination of material inebrities, and thus we become fit for our original natural life of service to the Lord. So there's page 1 of the 3 pages of purports. So that's Karma Yoga. That last part is Karma Yoga. And as we are discussing in the morning classes, that's one of the, it's not the direct or, pure direct. It's a path of transcendence that enables one to come when in contact with bhakti to direct bhakti, or those engaged in direct bhakti, they follow the same principle for the Lord. But it's making sacrifice back to the Supreme of everything that we have, which is the Lord's property, and we offer it back. Whatever we have, wherever we receive, we offer it back in the form of sacrifice. It's not too dissimilar from what we heard yesterday, but the brahmachari's training so that later in life he can understand everything belongs to the Lord by the training he got as a brahmachari. And then as the householder, instead of giving to the guru, it's given to the Lord in various ways, depending upon the circumstance of life. But it's meant to be a charity to the Lord through the Lord's devotees, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so another one of the dharmas is Raja Dharma, the dharma of a king. Raja Dharma is a great science. Unlike modern diplomacy for political supremacy, the kings were trained systematically to become munificent and not merely tax collectors. They were trained to perform different sacrifices only for the prosperity of the subjects. Sacrifices in the form of rituals or their austerities, like Maharaj Ambarish is observing a certain kind of Ekadasi for 1 year, or Ranti Dev observing what he was doing for the benefit of his citizens, same as what Ambarish was doing for the benefit of his citizens. He wasn't looking for his own benefit. So, sacrifices. To lead the prajas to the attainment of salvation was a great duty of the king. The father, the spiritual master, and the king are not to become irresponsible in the matter of leading their subjects to the path of ultimate liberation from birth, death, diseases, and old age. When these primary duties are properly discharged, there is no need of government of the people by the people. In modern days, the people, in general, occupy the administration by the strength of manipulated votes. But they are never trained in the primary duties of the king, and that is also not possible for everyone. Under the circumstances, the untrained administrators play havoc to make the subjects happy in all respects. On the other hand, these untrained administrators gradually become rogues and thieves and increase the taxation to finance a top-heavy administration that is useless for all purposes. As I'm reading this, I'm like, how did the Chinese government ever approve printing of Srimad Bhagavatam? But they did. They must have had scholars reading it before they approved it. But they did. Pretty astounding, huh? Actually, the qualified brahmanas are meant to give direction to the king for proper administration in terms of the scriptures, like Manusamhitas and Dharma Shastras of Parashara. A typical king is the ideal of the people in general And if the king is pious, religious, chivalrous, and munificent, the citizens generally follow him. Such a king is not a lazy, sensuous person living at the cost of the subjects, but alert always to kill thieves and dacoits. The pious kings were not merciful to dacoits and thieves in the name of nonsensical ahimsa. The thieves and dacoits were punished in an exemplary way, so that in the future no one would dare commit such nuisances. In an organized form, such thieves and dacoits were never meant for administration, as they are now. Ooh. Ooh. He hasn't even come to America yet. He's like saying these heavy things. What do you think? It's pretty heavy, right? Yes? He doesn't know what to say. Okay. Paragraph. The taxation law was simple. There was no force, no encroachment. The king had a right to take 1/4 of the production made by the subject. The king had a right to claim 1/4 of one's allotted wealth. One would never grudge parting with it because, due to the pious king and religious harmony, there was enough natural wealth, namely grains, fruits, flowers, silk, cotton, milk, jewels, minerals, etc., and therefore no one was materially unhappy. The citizens were rich in agricultural and animal husbandry, and therefore they had enough grains, fruits, and milk without any artificial needs of soaps and toilets, cinemas and bars. Paragraph. That's the taxation paragraph. More. The king had to see that the reserved energy of humanity was properly utilized. The reserved energy of humanity was properly utilized. Human energy is meant not exactly for fulfilling animal propensities, but for self-realization. The whole government was specifically designed to fulfill this particular purpose. As such, the king had to select properly the cabinet ministers, but not on the strength of voting background. The ministers, the military commanders, and even the ordinary soldiers were all selected by personal qualification, and the king had to supervise them properly before they were appointed to their respective posts. The king was especially vigilant to see that the tapasvis, or persons who sacrificed everything for disseminating spiritual knowledge, were never disregarded. Then there's another italics. The king knew well that the Supreme Personality of Godhead never tolerates any insult to his unalloyed devotees. Such tapasvis were trusted leaders, even of the rogues and thieves, who would never disobey the orders of tapasvis. The king would give special protection to illiterates, the helpless, and widows of the state. Defense measures were arranged previous to any attack by the enemies. The taxing process was easy, and it was not meant for squandering, but was for strengthening the reserve fund. The soldiers were recruited from all parts of the world, and they were trained for special duties. 3 more paragraphs. So that was Raja Dharma, big section. Next, salvation, moksha dharma. As far as salvation is concerned, one has to conquer the principles of lust, anger, unlawful desires, avarice, and bewilderment. To get free from anger, well, this is a good paragraph. Everyone likes this one. To get free from anger, one should learn how to forgive. To be free from unlawful desires, one should not make plans. By spiritual culture, one is able to conquer sleep. By tolerance, only can one conquer desire and avarice. Disturbances from various diseases can be avoided by regulated diets. By self-control, one can be freed from false hopes. And money can be saved by avoiding undesirable association. By practice of yoga, one can control hunger, and worldliness can be avoided by culturing the knowledge of impermanence. Dizziness can be conquered by rising up, and false arguments can be conquered by factual ascertainment. Talkativeness can be avoided by gravity and silence. And by prowess, one can avoid fearfulness. Perfect knowledge can be obtained by self-cultivation. Self-cultivation. One must be free from lust, avarice, anger, dreaming, etc. to actually attain the path of salvation. Okay, Sri Dharma is next. As far as the women class are concerned, they are accepted as a power of inspiration for men. As such, women are more powerful than men. So there. Mighty Julius Caesar was controlled by a Cleopatra. Such powerful women are controlled by shyness. Therefore, shyness is important for women. Once this control valve is loosened, women can create havoc in society by adultery. Adultery means production of unwanted children, known as Varna Sankara, who disturb the world. Last paragraph. The last item taught by Bhismadeva was Bhagavad Dharma, the process of pleasing the Lord. We are all eternal servants of the Lord, and when we forget this essential part of our nature, we are put into material conditions of life. The simple process of pleasing the Lord, parentheses for the householders especially, is to install the deity of the Lord at home. By concentrating on the deity, one may progressively go on with the daily routine work, worshiping the deity at home, serving the devotee, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, residing in a holy place, and chanting the holy name of the Lord are all inexpensive items by which one can please the Lord. Thus, the subject matter was explained by the grandfather to his grandchildren. Kind of revolutionary, some of the understanding Prabhupada is presenting here. As he calls it, a spiritual revolution to change the impious lives of people in general. And how did he know that this would be accepted? One might think, I have to make it softer, because otherwise it won't be accepted. But he wasn't as interested in that it get accepted as he just speak the truth and the chips would fall wherever they would fall. Not compromise. Bold. And by being bold, some people didn't like it. And some people liked it. Not just because he was speaking boldly, but the place from which, the conscious place from which he was speaking was a place of purity. And so that made it especially powerful. He was very willing to take on challengers. In fact, he would invite it. And then, depending upon whether someone was bold enough to challenge, he would speak sufficiently strongly so that it was addressed. Maybe some of you have seen that video of Srila Prabhupada in Australia and Madhavisa as the MC, and so the people in the audience started getting really rowdy. And he just had them have kirtan. Because it could have been dangerous. But otherwise, people that wouldn't get dangerously rowdy, he would take them on. And, so anyway, back to the points that he's making, besides how he's making them. There's a parallel between this narration, this particular narration, and Mahabharata, where Maharaj Yudhisthira was asking these questions. And Grandfather Bhishma in great detail was giving answers. It's just like this little section that we read, spoken by Vidura. Lots of detail. So that the audience that were lovers of Mahabharata, like persons who were lovers of Ramayana, similarly get details and details and details of proper conduct or principles of Dharma to live by. And then because the narration is so intriguing, and people were, just by hearing, it helped people become pious, like this little example of respecting a tapasvi. No, it's culture, but it's also the spiritual capacity of the tapasvi. Like when Narada Muni came and saw the hunter, Magari, doing what Magari was doing, he's a village person. I mean, a forest-dwelling village person that who knows if he ever heard anything, because his occupation was half killing animals. So what person that has heard or has culture would do like that, even if that's what his father did? But as soon as Narada spoke, he was ready to do what Narada said by his respect for Narada. Break my bow. How's that possible? But he did it. He did it. And Narada came through, saw that he was well maintained. That's the power of such a person. So we're not powerful like that, but at least in principle we can learn these principles of culture by carefully reading Prabhupada's books. Of course, I know some devotees, they really like Mahabharata. I know some devotees, they really like Ramayana. Not like they don't like Srimad Bhagavatam, but they really like those literatures in particular. So there's a purpose. It helps people who are less inclined to be directly engaged in service to the personality of God, and particularly Ramayana, because of the details and details and details and details and details of morality and virtue. That's there in Ramayana as well. but certainly in Ramayana, very prominent is the position of Lord Ramachandra. Anyway, back to the Bhagavatam. Understanding right conduct was his question. The various manifestations of Dharma was Yudhishthira's question, and the reason was grandfather Bhishma was their grandfather, and he was the replacement for their deceased father, and he was the knowledgeable in all matters. And if he's going to assume, as Bhishma said Krishna wants, the position of being a king, he's got to know all these things. So he asked Bhismadeva to supply the answer. I mean, he could have asked Krishna. He could have asked Vyasadeva, but he was inspired by Krishna to ask Bhishma, as we read, because he wanted Bhishma to be honored. Krishna likes. So let's see if there's some discussion. We have a hand up in the back.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So in the salvation paragraph.
In which paragraph?
Salvation.
Salvation paragraph.
Prabhupada says, you can avoid talkativeness by gravity and silence, which I understand. But then he also says dizziness can be conquered by raising up. What does that mean?
I'm having a hard time hearing you, so let me see if I can find that sentence. What does which one mean? Oh, dizziness can be by rising up. What does it mean?
Yes.
Stand up when you're dizzy. Now, if you're really dizzy, you stand up, you're going to fall over. Is that what you're wondering? Vertigo. Somebody here has vertigo? Okay. So when you start to get dizzy, do you stand up or you sit down? You sit down. My understanding is this. Dizziness fundamentally has to do with life airs. And if life airs are not in alignment, then you feel dizziness. And standing up can have an effect of realigning life airs. But there must be some connection between the nervous system and life airs that makes it effective. I don't know what that science is, but.
So should I understand this in something in the line of sitting is the new smoking, so dizziness means you have to raise up?
Should you understand what? Could you follow? Others up here can't follow what you're saying. Try it again.
Sitting is the new smoking.
Oh. Well. What journal did you read that from? Because it's quite different. Sitting and smoking are quite different. So I don't know if there's a one-to-one correlation between those two things. Why do you ask that?
I didn't understand. What does he mean by dizziness can be conquered by rising up? Because if we get up when we are dizzy, then we fall down. So I was wondering why. And especially, I'm not sure if this is in the yogic principle, some kind of dizziness is there, or it's physical dizziness Prabhupada is talking about. And, and
Yeah, it's
Prabhupada
physical.
being
It's
a
physical. It's physical. It's not
Prabhupada being
mental.
a medical person, he knows he knows.
Well, I don't know if because he's a medical person, he's saying what's a Vedic principle. I mean, the context, I would, if you really want to pursue this, it sounds like you want to pursue it. I recommend that you get an edition, probably it's available online. That's how I got this. I had to edit it because it was like this archaic English, so I had to edit it. Instead of saying half and thou and all those things, I made it readable. But get a version and go to that section where he's instructing on Moksha Dharma and see what it says. This is just a synopsis. I'm only saying what the little bit that I understand about dizziness. It has to do with life airs. Therefore, I gave the answer that I gave. But it's probably also neurological. Like, if you want to know more about it, read Mahabharata. Read that section of Mahabharata.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. You have something?
Some of these statements that are made is contradictory. Like when you think about dizzy, stand up, it's kind of like the idea that rock candy is bitter to someone who has jaundice, but normally we just know it's sweet, so it seems contradictory, but you still have to take it to cure, no? And I wonder if that's where some of the confusion or maybe to the question is that these appear to be contradictory almost.
That doesn't seem to be what her question. She just wants to know what it means. Not that it seems contradictory. Correct? Yeah. You have something on this topic. You have a different topic. Anybody else on this topic? Okay, go ahead.
Maharaj, this is from the last paragraph. It says, one may progressively go on with the daily routine work, worshipping the deity at home, serving the devotees, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, residing in the holy place, and chanting the holy name of the Lord are all inexpensive items by which one can please the Lord. We see that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also recommended doing this 5,
It's
at
Rupa
least
Goswami.
one.
Rupa Goswami.
Rupa Goswami. So, if you see the 4 of them, even if they did independently out of this 5, we can see the progress in spirituality. But just by residing in the Dham, not doing anything, how does one progress? Are they?
If you do one of the 5, how do you progress? Or if you do all 5, how do you progress? What's your question?
No, my question is, out of this 5, even if you do
1.
one,
Fantastic.
you're progressing, like chanting.
Yes.
I see progress.
You bet.
Reading Srimad
You
Bhagavatam,
bet.
serving devotees.
Yes.
But if you are just residing in the Dham but not doing anything, then what is that which uplifts? I mean,
How does it benefit?
yes.
You get spiritual benefit. You doubt it?
I want to know how. Maybe,
You want to
because
know
in
how?
Dham,
By spiritual potency, that one gets spiritual benefit. No, how it's going to unfold in the life of this individual or that individual or another individual is going to be different because they're individuals, but there's spiritual benefit. Enormous spiritual benefit. Enormous spiritual benefit.
like in the
No,
Dham.
so that you can take any one of these and say, those who chant the holy name with the idea of becoming one with the Supreme, that's an offense, isn't it? Well, there are people that chant the holy name, that chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra with that idea. I met one when I was in college. Won't tell you who his name is. But he was a celebrity. He was chanting Hare Krishna. And he was an impersonalist. Or there are people that read Srimad Bhagavatam and they're professional reciters and they're defiling the Bhagavatam by their rendering it in an impure way, etc. So when there's spiritual benefit, just touching, there's spiritual benefit. Touching the holy dham is spiritual benefit, and then it can unfold in different ways for different people. The rickshaw-wallas, they're not to be disrespected because they're residents of the dham. Satchidananda Swami was recently here. I remember him narrating a story about a friend of his, a German devotee, that he was trained. Before you get on the rickshaw, you set a price, and so he set a price for the rickshawwala, and he was taken to the front of the Krishna Balaram temple, and all of a sudden the rickshawwala wanted to double, and the devotee started, raising his voice, and the rickshawwala raised his voice, and he, left his rupees on the seat, and the rickshawwala threw the money back at him and walked away. And that devotee, Satchidananda Swami, hadn't seen him for a number of years. And when he saw him many years later, he looked a wreck. And his friend said, "It was my offense to that rickshawwala that caused me to fall from my position in spirit Krishna consciousness." And I very clearly remember, the feeling of losing my Krishna consciousness at that very moment. So, how people behave themselves, be careful. Don't judge. Be respectful, even if their behavior is, not nice. They're special people, simply because they reside in the Dham. Now they can do bad things. They can do criminal things, and so forth.
Thank you, Maharaj. Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. I'm wondering whether, I know residing in Mathura is definitely a holy place. I'm wondering whether if someone has deities in his home, and can the home be considered a holy place?
Of course. You read the 7 principles of ISKCON, establishing holy places. How do you do that? Have people install deities in their home. What makes the difference between a temple and a home? It's not just the deity, but it's the devotional activities that go on in a temple makes it a temple. It can be just a regular. Many of our original temples were just single-family residences. Now it's called the Hare Krishna temple. It doesn't have to be something big and fancy, just a place where Krishna-centered activities go on. So having a deity in your home assists, so the home becomes a holy place. Congratulations, you live in a holy place. Anything else? Yes?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So when I always hear this charity, 50% charity, I consider as a goal that we should strive for. But is there any principle of charity that we should follow in Grihastha ashram?
That's the principle. You strive for it. Now, I've heard discussions, I'm not a householder, but I've heard discussions amongst householders, 50% of what? So 50% of gross, 50% of net, 50% after taxes, 50% after, we start slicing the pie. And, I don't know of too many householders that meet that standard. So your question is, in real practical terms, how am I as a householder supposed to manage my finances? That's the standard to go for, because it wasn't said once or twice, it was said many times. So it's an important principle. And how to live your life in practical terms, because, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Find for yourself something that makes sense, and you abide by that as best you can. So, the best way to do it is just set this aside. And then there's something left, rather than after everything is spent, then what's left. That's the way to go. There are householders who I know who have been advised like that by other householders, and even what's your income, how many children, here's a percentage, and just set that percentage aside. That's the charity percentage of your income. And then one can divide that charity percentage of income, in different ways. There's not a rule about that, because the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas and the temple and, good cause, like TOVP or something, or whatever it is. So but it comes from that percentage of my income. And then you don't have to get mental about it, because you just know that's this fiscal year, that's what I'm targeting. That's how I'm budgeting. And that's my discretionary fund, and when that's used, that's it.
Thank you, Maharaj. I think you answered this, but it's in my head. Like Bhismadeva and Dronacharya, they were well versed in the scriptures. But when people ask why did they not speak during the Vastraharan, how to answer that? Is it like
Krishna wanted to show. That's why.
Same situation like Arjuna.
Krishna wanted to show. In case of Bhishma, as exalted as he is, if you don't do the right thing, then you have to suffer. So Krishna wanted to show. So they didn't speak. Something else? You have something, yes?
Maharaj, when you read about the initial section, what Vidura spoke, one of the main points that Vidura makes is that when you see that morality is not being followed and you don't speak anything, then you incur sinful reactions. And I'm just wondering how that plays out in a devotee sangha. Sometimes we see something in front of our eyes, but it's a vastly senior devotee, and it's not easy to speak up sometimes.
You don't
speak up.
You don't speak up. You may bring to the attention of someone that's their superior,
Mm-hmm.
and not in a fault-finding manner, but in a
Mm-hmm.
caring for the well-being of that person, and there's so many ands, possibilities. Maybe I didn't perceive correctly. Maybe they were under a duress that just I don't know about. And it depends on the relationship also. There may be someone that's, but it's just a point of etiquette, Vaishnava etiquette, that we don't correct superiors. We may bring something to their attention in a humble manner. We may not. Or we may go we may not, we may also go to someone who's in a senior position, and they may or may not, so the responsibility, the emphasis that I got from reading this little section by Vidura speaking was, if asked a question, one should not bear false witness, one should speak the truth. And if you don't give the answer when you could, then you're responsible. If you give false testimony, but it's specific to the thing that happened. Draupadi asked, and she didn't get an answer, and he's giving scriptural evidence or historical evidence for you're obliged to answer. And they didn't answer. And then when Draupadi gave her a long talk, then finally Bhishma said something like, I don't understand how to give a proper answer. So your question still stands. The emphasis, my understanding of the emphasis is when asked, if you don't say, or you give false testimony. But it's not simply if you see something, you don't say something. That's not the major part of what he's presenting. There is responsibility. So how do you live that? How do you live up to that responsibility, especially if it's, an elder person? That's your question.
Elder person, and when multiple individuals in a community are hurt by that also.
Well, in a community, we have elders. I call them village elders. We have authorities, but we also have village elders. So it can go to an authority person, or it can go to a village elder person and say, I'm a junior person, and I may not have understood properly, but this came to my attention, and I'm presenting this to you as a village elder. And, I don't know what you feel if anything should be done, but I'm bringing it to your attention not in a fault-finding manner, because that's a big part of it is not in a fault-finding mood, because if it's in a fault-finding mood, then immediately, whatever happens or doesn't happen, one's consciousness becomes covered. One is culpable for fault-finding. So we have that something internal that we have to guard against fault-finding. Very insidious. But if it's not in that mood, but it's because I think others in our community may be negatively impacted by this, so I'm bringing it to your attention because it's not my position as a junior person. The modern culture is something else, but civilized people observe culture. It's one option at least for a civilized culture person. Especially when others are being negatively impacted in one way or another. And especially if it happens more than once. Anything else out there?
Maharaj, there is
Online.
Online question.
Okay, let's go.
This question is from Keshava Madhava Prabhu. How do we tolerate when there is negative criticism among senior Vaishnavas? How can a neophyte tolerate such criticism in respectful manner?
How can you tolerate it in a respectful manner? well, there's other options besides tolerating in a respectful manner. One option, if you see criticism amongst seniors, you can get up and walk out. That's a suitable. You don't have to say something that, disapproving. You can just silently, politely get up and leave. And then you may want to do something after that, but that's something you can do right at the moment. It happens. It's detrimental. And sometimes when we may not understand how this one is speaking to that one, we may correctly understand. We also may incorrectly understand. I mean, I'm thinking, as I'm speaking, I'm thinking of a situation where one of my godbrothers, Sridhar Maharaj, was residing at the New York Temple for a long time. And from time to time, persons would come. I won't mention the name, but this person and that person and a third person, they had the kind of relationship where they spoke to each other in disparaging ways. And then the other one responded in disparaging ways, and they responded in disparaging ways. How can you guys talk to each other like this? And then the answer was, this is just fun. They didn't mean anything disparaging. It's just part of fun. It wasn't meant in a, in any kind of hurtful or harsh or critical way. Just like I can't, I was uncomfortable, but I didn't understand the relationship, and I just it's been in my mind since I did it. When we had this situation in Potomac where it was question answer session, and Mahatma and I were in the front to do questions answers, and Urmila was in the back, and everyone was pointing at Urmila. So Urmila, could you? She didn't want to come. So I did something that was out of character. I stood up, took the microphone, started walking right in her direction. She stood up. She put the chair between her and me, like as if I was going to attack her or something. And it wasn't so. I meant it in an affectionate way, in a kind way, not in a challenging way, in a confrontational way. And I don't think she took it that way either. But I didn't. It wasn't maybe so good that I did like that. It was meant in a fun and a teasing way, and sure enough, she came and sat, and she sat right next to me. It's not like I was uncomfortable or if she was. But, sometimes older devotees may behave with one another that's hard to understand. When it's like out of kindness and appreciation for one another. Well, it might look like something else. It might look like confrontational and something else. One has to be careful, especially in public forum. How are we doing? Anything? Ragamika, you always have something.
I'm just reflecting on the wonderful point you made, a comment you made about Srila Prabhupada and writing these purports before he even came to America. That his objective was simply to speak the truth. and his faith that that was, what his spiritual master ordered him to do. And then in his prayer in the Jaladutta, he prayed, "Make me a success or a failure as you wish. I'm just a puppet in your hands." And then I think, then when he came, he did make some adjustments that were criticized by his godbrothers. So where do you place those things in order to be more successful in spreading Krishna consciousness? He made adjustments.
Yeah, he made adjustments. This is a nice question. He made adjustments in details, not in principle. And what's the difference between it? How do you evaluate what's a principle and what's a detail?
Okay, maybe that.
Huh?
That's maybe what I'm aiming at asking. Hey.
Yeah. Well, fundamental teachings, Rupa Goswami gives us the fundamental teachings. And a strict follower of Siddhanta, and Rupa Goswami's application of Siddhanta was not compromised. Then, for effectiveness, he stood by principle, and then allowed time, place, circumstance kinds of considerations. And the effectiveness had everything to do with relatability. Here's one, for example. I was trying to remember what was the circumstance. I was in Prabhupada's quarters when Sri Govinda came from Chicago to meet with Prabhupada. And he had a complaint, and he had a request. His complaint had to do with Mula Prakriti and others wearing apple buttons. It didn't say, she's a representative of Apple. She just had an apple button. And his complaint was, Sri Govinda's complaint was, it's misleading. It makes people think that we're representatives of Apple Records. Because, that Apple logo was in Krishna book. That's where she got it from. But it was their logo for their music. So Prabhupada asked him, in your country, is this illegal? He said, no, it's just misleading. And Prabhupada said a few things, but he said it was harmless. She didn't, I think he asked, does she say that I'm from Apple Records? She said, no, they're just wearing that button leads people to believe. And so he was objecting in principle. And Prabhupada said it's harmless. That was his decision on that issue. And then he wasn't happy with that answer, but that's the answer he got. And then he asked Prabhupada, when you come to Chicago, can you attend a public gathering? I'd like to arrange a big hall, this and that and the other thing. Big splash, big advertising, big assembly. And then Prabhupada said, if you charge money for admission, then yes. And then Sri Govinda did a, whiplash. What? You've always said, we don't present Krishna consciousness for some money, that's, what professional people do. So why are you asking like this? And Prabhupada said, for whatever the reason, it wasn't like in all circumstances, this is what he said. It was that particular circumstance, at least. He said, in your country, if people get something like this for free, they don't take it so seriously. If they make some modest contribution, then they'll take it more seriously. So it was to help the receptivity, whereas one might say that's a violation of a principle. It wasn't for him. It was to help people take the contact with Prabhupada more seriously because they made some sacrifice. Now, it's a little bit like receiving a book and give what you can. Make some sacrifice. And then they value it more than if you just give out. No, giving out is also okay. But it's good if people make some sacrifice. So that was a detail. The principle is broadcast widely and then adjust for time, place, and circumstance. We abide by the precepts of Scripture. We abide by the laws of the state. We don't break the laws of the state in order to, be more successful. We don't do that. You have something? Here's a microphone.
How do we understand the coming down from 64 rungs to minimum 16? Is it a compromise or what?
He saw it was practical. I mean, it started with a bigger number, but it was practical. This was a practical number. It's the principle of the holy name, and then setting some vrata, that's also a principle. So he established the principle. For him, that principle was the requirement for initiation. People can chant less, people can chant more, but the minimum for initiation. So your question, is that a principle or a detail? Is that your question?
Compromise.
Is it a compromise? Yeah, it's a compromise, recognizing people weren't capable. But it did violate a principle.
Thank you.
Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.